Welcome to the Defense Acquisition University. This material is for nonprofit educational use only. Speakers' views and opinions are not necessarily those of the Department of Defense or DAU.
Pretty impressive, isn't it? The F-35 represents the cutting edge of fighter aircraft technology and a significant investment by the Department of Defense toward the safety and security of not only the United States, but also the safety and security of the men and women of the armed forces who both fly and rely on its capabilities. Hello, I'm Professor John Kenninger, the DAU Center Director for Aircraft Operations. The DoD relies on highly skilled, highly motivated defense contractors to produce, and in many cases, maintain these aircraft. We're going to discuss protections imposed by the government to ensure the readiness of these DoD aviation assets. Welcome to part one of a four-part series on the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement Clause 252.228-7001 titled Ground and Flight Risk, referred to in this series as the GFRC. In part one, we'll conduct an overview of the applicability of the GFRC and the prescribing FAR and DFAR sections that mandate when and when not the GFRC must be included on a contract. The genesis of the GFRC begins with the Federal Acquisitions Regulation, or FAR. The FAR, Part 42.302, titled Contract Administration Functions, lists 71 tasks or processes that must be executed by whoever has been delegated responsibility for the contract administration. These tasks include conducting post-award orientation conferences, assuring contractor compliance to contractual quality assurance requirements, and ensuring contractor compliance with contractual safety requirements. There are many requirements, but of most interest to assuring safe and effective flight and ground operations, and specifically to contracts involving aircraft, is the task found at 42.302A56, which simply states, maintain surveillance of flight operations. Now, the implication here is that if you have contracts involving aircraft, you must have a process to maintain surveillance. This FAR reference doesn't tell us how to conduct this surveillance, only that federal departments must have a process with which to maintain surveillance. Within the DoD resides the how of flight operations surveillance, and it begins with when, and the first prescribing DFAR's reference found at subpart 228.370 titled Additional Clauses, which tells us to use a GFRC in all solicitations and contracts for the acquisition, development, production, modification, maintenance, repair, flight, or overhaul of aircraft. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd be hard-pressed to find aircraft work this quote didn't encapsulate. The bottom line is that if you intend to contract either the production of new government aircraft or, as we like to say, the wrench turning on existing government aircraft, the GFRC is required. But remember when I said there could also be aircraft requirements where the GFRC was not required? Well, the previous DFAR's reference goes on to give 4 instances when the GFRC should not be included on contract. The first exception describes actions that services commonly refer to as transient maintenance. Think of a stop at your local full-service gas station and the services available there: fueling, topping off your oil and antifreeze, or changing a tire. As the quote states, it's those actions necessary for the normal operation of an aircraft. If you intend to contract such operations, the GFRC would not be required. The second exception is when the federal government elects to purchase an aircraft from a manufacturer as a commercial off-the-shelf or COTS product. This means the government will purchase, say, a Boeing 777 cargo conversion aircraft of which the government will only have say in the final product to the extent that Boeing normally provides to air carriers like United or American Airlines. Like ordering a car from your local dealer, your choices involve the model and its options and a negotiated price. You don't have the right to inspect your car through the assembly process. With the Boeing example, the government has no right to assert flight operations surveillance requirements on the production of the aircraft. Therefore, no requirement for the GFRC. The third exception is a bit trickier. The GFRC is a Department of Defense clause used in contracts where the DoD is the customer procuring products or services. It protects the interests of the DoD. If the Department of Defense is procuring products or services for a non-DoD customer, such as F-15s for Saudi Arabia, the GFRC is not a contract requirement if the non-DoD customer has not agreed to hold the DoD harmless for any costs incurred associated with the production of the aircraft. The fourth and last exception to the GFRC inclusion involves existing government aircraft. Specifically, the DoD utilizes several aircraft that are militarized versions of commercial aircraft. The UH-72 Lakota is a militarized version of the Eurocopter's EC-145 utility helicopter. The Army maintains the Lakota to FAA airworthiness standards. And if this were maintained at an FAA licensed repair facility, the GFRC would not be required. In this first part of the GFRC series, we learned about very important FAR contract administration requirement when aircraft are involved. We also discussed the prescribing DFARS references that requires inclusion of the GFRC on product and service contracts that involve government aircraft. Please view the other videos in this series to learn about the GFRC definitions, limitations of liability, and requirements imposed on the contractor through the GFRC's invocation of DCMA Instruction 8210.1 Charlie. Thank you for watching.
This has been a production of the Defense Acquisition University, where people come to learn, perform, succeed.